Good afternoon, everyone. If we could go ahead and take our seats, we will get started with TOZA Blue. Everybody having a good day so far? Awesome. So this is TOZA Blue. This is my first time in this session, so like all of you, this will be new for me, but we piloted this session last year, and it got some of the highest marks of all of the TOZA sessions. So, of course, we changed it around because we weren't happy with those, so this one will be even better. Our program manager today is Ian Durant, and I don't know where is Ian is over there. So Ian is responsible for putting together all of this content. He is our Senior Global Product Manager for the AED business. And then Matt Desch is a Senior Sales Engineer in the data team, and so we have a team of net rescue rangers out there in the back that are going to help us with all of the data downloads and all of that. So all of your team leaders here are from either the resuscitation or the data business, and then I think all of the participants, I believe, are LifeVest, right? And so this is a good mix, I think, of the TOZA spirit here. Our objectives are to understand what is high-quality CPR and how that, along with the use of an AED, can make a real difference in survival. Now, when we were putting this session together, I had not yet heard the story that we saw this morning. And so I think she covered it better than we can here in terms of what happens if you're not protected from sudden death, and kind of what the response system out there in the world is. And so as LifeVest reps, right, this is a chance to kind of see the other side of what happens. Most of the cardiac arrests, unfortunately, occur in the low-risk population, not the high-risk population. And so this is the state of the art in terms of what we can do to protect them and help them survive. So we're going to demonstrate the importance of Zoll's Real CPR help technology. We're going to learn about some ways that you can engage your customers in a broader discussion about AEDs, not just in their offices and clinics, but out in the public setting. And we're going to have some fun and maybe win some money. How's that? All right? So let me just give a little bit of background. I think you were probably mostly aware of this, but if somebody is not protected with a LifeVest, there's about a 90% chance that they're not going to survive an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. I mean, it's almost literally the opposite of if they are wearing it, right? If you're wearing a LifeVest, you got a 90+% chance of surviving the event. If you're not, you have a less than 10% chance of survival. It's that stark. And actually, that's the US number. It's actually much worse in much of the rest of the world. The US has one of the highest survival rates. And it has been shown, and I'll show you the details in a minute, that both delivery of high-quality CPR, either by bystanders or professional rescuers, and the use of an AED, so getting defibrillation as early as possible, has been clinically shown to save lives. This is the classic AHA survival curve, and basically what it says is that untreated, a cardiac arrest victim's chances of survival decline 10 percentage points every minute. Right now, we talked about the LifeVest and its 90% shock survival rate. That's because it gets to those patients in that first minute. Right? The LifeVest is actually the strongest proof statement that exists for at least the left side of this curve. But after 10 minutes go by and you get through the electrical phase and the metabolic phase, there's just not many survivors beyond 10 minutes with no intervention. It has been shown that high-quality CPR, if it is delivered in that window, can slow that rate of decay. It doesn't stop it, but certainly, we have examples, as you heard about this morning, of somebody who got more than 15 minutes of CPR and still survived neurologically intact. And so we're going to learn a lot about what is high-quality CPR and in a sense of how difficult it really is to perform. So let's just run through some of the statistics. So if responders do nothing in a cardiac arrest, there's about a 5% chance of patient surviving. If bystanders intervene and perform CPR, that goes up to 9%. If responders apply an AED, it's 24%, and this was all from the Resuscitation Outcomes Consortium research on tens of thousands of patients across the country over many years. Does anyone have a guess of how often in an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest an AED is actually used? Anyone want to guess? 20%? Anybody want to go higher or lower? 7? 2% of the time is an AED deployed before EMS arrives, right? So we have a long way to go to have AEDs be available and have the natural response be quick enough to make a difference here. So both the AEDs and LifeVest they're very similar products. In fact, you can think of the LifeVest as a wearable AED. It is essentially the same product. And those are really the only two ways to intervene early enough to make a difference here, right? So, so we'll get into that. We're going to have some fun. I will turn it over to Ian, and we will walk you through the mechanics of how the session works, and please take it to heart and enjoy yourselves.
Am I on? Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the TOZA general session. I'd like to thank everybody for attending this. This is my favorite, near and dear to me. I've been within our AED group for the past 13 years at Zoll. I'm a senior global product manager for AEDs. So what you're about to do is on products that I hold near and dear to my heart. Another thing we're going to do is have some fun, right? So you had lunch, you sat through the TOZA general session. Now we're going to actually get you guys off your chairs and you're going to do some CPR for a little bit. So I apologize, I have to do a quick disclaimer. You guys will be using an AED, but that AED currently is not approved by the FDA. But there is some reasons why we're using it, which you'll learn of as you do the session, mainly because it can get the data off over Wi-Fi. So feel free to use it, play with it, have fun, but just I would ask that you don't take pictures, post them on Facebook, Instagram, all that fun stuff. So are you guys ready? Your table leaders know what to do. And as John has said before, cardiac arrest can happen everywhere, but an AED is not all available. If you look in front of you, there's a mannequin. Feel free to name the mannequin. But let's get started. 10 minutes, save a life. So, perfect. So you got 9 minutes and 48 seconds. Feel free to do CPR, use the AED, do what you need to do. Your table leaders are there to help you. Grab an AED in the front of the room. They're by table number. So grab the one with your table number. So it appears that someone took table 114. All the AEDs have numbers on them. And if you look down and your AD says 114 and you're not at table 114, let us know.
Right here.
You have 114?
Yeah, somebody took 125. So
All right, everybody, we got under 50 seconds left. We got under 40 seconds left. Thirty seconds remaining. Fifteen seconds remaining. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Perfect. You can stop. Please, table leaders, turn your AEDs off. So table leaders, can you please turn your AEDs off? Perfect. We had a few minor mishaps of AEDs going to different tables, but don't worry. RescueNet Case Review is the software we use to analyze the data. It can figure that out for us. Perfect. So all the table leaders right now are going to turn their AEDs off. They're going to transmit the data so we can get the data off the AEDs. So while they're doing that, we have a group in the corner called the RescueNet Rangers. They're here to help table leaders. If you have an issue transferring the data, just raise your table number up. One of them will come over and help. Perfect. So it's my pleasure to introduce Kenan. Kenan is, he can introduce himself, but he runs our clinical marketing team, and he will give you a quick overview of kind of why the use of an AED and CPR is so important. So let's put our hands together for Kenan and welcome him up to the stage.
So Ian and the TOZA team leaders for this session asked that I come and spend maybe 15 minutes or so with you as they're collecting data over in the corner to try to help make sure everybody understands how important high-quality CPR is and how that pairs with defibrillation. So I actually deleted my first slide because John shared that info already with you. But basically the gist of that slide, right? So if you're not wearing a life vest, if we kind of call it what it is, if you're not wearing a life vest and you have a cardiac arrest, you're probably going to die. The frustrating part about that is that in the last few years, there's been a lot of improvements in technology, a lot of science that has really laid out the recipe or the process that we need to follow in order to actually have a patient survive. So if you have a story like you heard this morning from Jen Hayes, and you walk through this chain of survival, you can actually start to piece together how every one of these links in the chain was in place for her story, right? So the template is there. There are communities, there are EMS services, there are hospitals that have really started to implement this template or this recipe and have seen significant improvements in survival. So we'll walk through this quickly. The first link in the chain is early recognition. So I think like a tenured group of life vest folks probably know better than anybody else how important it is to recognize a cardiac arrest quickly. So if you don't have a life vest on, it pretty much means call 911. The next two links in the chain is what we're going to spend most of this talk discussing, and it's high quality CPR and defibrillation. The AHA actually calls those two things, right, CPR and defibrillation, the critical combination when it comes to resuscitation. The fourth link in the chain, I think it's an ambulance, right? It's basically summing up ALS care, advanced life support. So what the paramedics and nurses and doctors do, they have a bunch of drugs, they do a bunch of fancy things, but even within that chain of survival, the most important things that they do, it's also CPR and defibrillation, right? So don't kind of miss that while you look at this chain of survival. The last link in the chain is actually what happens after you get pulses back in that patient. So that gets into things like therapeutic hypothermia, so cooling, post-arrest, which of course Zoll is involved in, but outside the scope of today's topic. So if you have all of these links in this chain come together, your patient actually has a pretty good chance of surviving. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen often enough, certainly not as often as it should. So high quality CPR, so the AHA, the American Heart Association, says this. High quality CPR is the single most important factor when it comes to surviving a cardiac arrest. So it's not the only factor, right? There's several links in the chain of survival, but it's the single most important factor. Before I forget, so there's an opportunity to win money later through quiz questions. So some of these things that might reappear. The AHA's 2015 guidelines has a list of basically 5 criteria that they use to describe high quality CPR. So the first is adequate rate. The second is adequate depth. We'll get into what that means. The third is full chest recoil. So if you don't come off the chest all the way between each chest compression, you don't allow the heart to refill with blood. And basically it means that you're not doing much of anything, essentially. Right? So full recoil is really important. Minimizing interruptions in chest compressions. So this is literally a killer, right? When people interrupt chest compressions during a cardiac arrest. Unfortunately, I saw a lot of interruptions this past 10 minutes, right? There are a number of agencies and fire departments that are actually going to uninterrupted chest compressions. So where I live in San Diego, if you call 911 and they confirm a cardiac arrest, they'll tell you to do 700 chest compressions. That's it, right? No ventilation, 700 chest compressions, about 7 minutes, and paramedics should be there in that amount of time. The last one is more of a problem for advanced life support providers, but it's ventilations that are occurring too quickly. So when we talk about high quality CPR, sometimes defibrillation gets left behind and people don't really understand where it fits. So defibrillation is absolutely critical when it's needed, right? It's a critical combination between defibrillation and high quality CPR. So the problem is that more often than not, patients in cardiac arrest present in a rhythm that doesn't need a shock. So if they do need a shock, fantastic, defibrillate them, right? There are a lot of studies out there for public access AEDs that show about 40% of the time a patient actually needs to be defibrillated. So what that really means, right, if you ever encounter a cardiac arrest and you run and get the AED and you come running back like you saw on TV, on Baywatch or whatever, right? You're gonna rip a shirt off, put the pads on, and turn it on. The AED is gonna say no shock advised, right? Odds are that will happen. So what are you gonna do next, right? In a hospital setting, the incidence of a patient needing a shock is actually even lower. It's about 20%. So 20% of the time for a cardiac arrest in a hospital does the patient present in a rhythm that needs a defibrillation. So it is critical, right? It's just not needed as often as you might think. So high quality CPR, there's been a lot of recent science that's shown us how important it is to do high quality CPR. And what we used to say, which is just push hard and fast on the center of the chest, right? Just not good enough anymore. So the current AHA guidelines recommend, pay attention to this too, a chest compression rate of 100 to 120 compressions a minute, and a chest compression depth of 2 to 2.4 inches, or 5 to 6 centimeters if you're not from the US. So one of the things I'll do from time to time is, not in a group this big, but have everybody get out like a pen and paper and try to draw a line that's between 5 and 6 centimeters long, and we come around and measure it, and most people can't do that. So think about that, and you think about like the story from this morning. If somebody, like if your neighbor comes knocking on your door early one morning or late one night because they know that you work at Zoll, and says, come help me do CPR, could you do chest compressions between 5 and 6 centimeters in that situation without any assistance? So the idea of high quality CPR, it's pretty easy to explain. It's a lot harder to do. So I haven't seen your results. They're working on them in the corner. I can pretty much guess, right, how they're going to look before and after feedback. And one of the things that I wanted to sort of head off early is I don't want anyone to see their results and say, well, I'm not a nurse, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a professional. The professionals all do really good CPR, right? But like I've never done this before, so of course I didn't do well. So one of the things that my team spends a lot of time doing is an activity like this for clinicians whose job it is to do chest compressions. Overwhelmingly, the most common score that we give those individual clinicians is 0% compressions in target. Right? We have them do 2 minutes. The most common score by far is 0% compressions in target, meaning rate or depth. Right? Some of them do really well. The problem is everyone thinks they do really well, right? But none of them really have the data to back that up. So when we flip that around and give them CPR feedback, which you'll see in a little bit, those numbers flip, right? The majority of clinicians do good CPR with CPR feedback 70, 80, 90% of the time. So there's an idea out there. So I have a 2-year-old son. When he was born, I told my parents and my parents-in-law that they had to go do CPR classes if they wanted to babysit him, right? Like a babysitter or something. So my parents went, and they went to a class in their town. It was like 2 hours or something. And so my mom called me and pretty much said, well, all they told us to do is just push hard and fast on the center of the chest, right? There's a lot of science that has shown us that that's just not good enough, right? Especially for professional rescuers. So there was a nice study that came out in 2012 that showed a nice Gaussian curve, a bell curve, on chest compression rate and how that correlated to this y-axis here, survival to discharge, survival to hospital discharge. You can see it's centered at about 110 compressions a minute. This is why the guidelines say 100 to 120. So I'm a paramedic. That's what I did before I came to Zoll. Before this science came out, the guidelines said push hard and fast on the patient's chest. So everything in a fire station is a competition. So you didn't know that. So we'd compete. It would be like, how many tacos can you eat? How many push-ups can you do? And when it came to chest compressions, it was how many chest compressions can you do in a minute? Right? So we do 150, 160 chest compressions. Right? So when this study came out, this data shows us that what we did literally gave those patients a 0% chance of survival. Right? So that's the kind of thing that keeps me up at night. But now we have help and feedback so you don't make those sort of mistakes. Chest compression depth, it's a similar thing. They used to say at least 2 inches. Right? But it turns out that there's a sweet spot for survival right around 2 to 2.4 inches. Right? So the guidelines weren't a guess, right? They were based on science. And I still hear clinicians say, well, it's impossible to do 2 to 2.4 inches. Like, it's that much, right? Wiggle room. But it's based in science. Right? If you go shallower than that or deeper than that, you're giving your patient a significantly decreased chance of survival. So if that was maybe a little bit pessimistic, right, I'll leave you with something a little more optimistic. And that is, if you take this idea of high-quality CPR, devices that give you CPR feedback, and combine it with enough training to where people know how to use it, how it works, there's a significant opportunity for improvement. So the one example I have today is an EMS agency out of Arizona that came out of Mesa Fire near Phoenix. So what they basically did was a year-long or almost 2-year-long study that mimicked what you all are doing in here today in like 1 hour. So for a period of about 6 months, their paramedics on their ambulances went and ran cardiac arrests with no CPR feedback, but just like today, they were collecting data. And after a period of time, they called all their paramedics in, gave them about 2 hours of training, and turned on that CPR feedback, right? Trained people how to use it, why it's important to do good, high-quality CPR. And basically, you can see these quality metrics. I won't go through them line by line, but basically they went from doing really bad, really poor CPR, too shallow, too fast, right? Things that we see all the time, to doing chest compressions that were within the recommendations of the AHA's guidelines. So what that meant for the patients, right, in MESA was almost a 3 times chance or an odds of survival from cardiac arrest, right? They nearly tripled the odds of survival by doing high-quality CPR. So I'm hopefully convincing you that it matters, right, to do really high-quality CPR. It's, again, the single most important intervention when it comes to cardiac arrest. So why are we talking about this? You'll see in a few minutes what CPR feedback looks like if you haven't done it before. So I say this having done a lot of CPR, right? I never want to do CPR again without feedback, right? And I think you'll feel the same way by the end of today. So these devices give you real-time feedback on your rate and depth. They give you audible feedback as well to help correct you if you're going a little bit, say, too shallow in your chest compressions. And again, help you stay on track. And this technology is in all of Zoll defibrillators. So a little bit of a long quote that I'm not going to read, but basically what this quote says, and it comes from the American Heart Association, is that CPR is, they put it nicely, there's a tremendous opportunity to improve CPR, right? Both in and out of hospital. And if we're able to do that, we could significantly improve cardiac arrest outcomes, right? Again, from both in and out of the hospital. So last slide is a summary. So defibrillation is critical, again, when it's needed. The chances of a defibrillation being needed decrease over time, as all of you know, as life vest folks. But the combination of defibrillation and high-quality CPR, it's the critical combination during a cardiac arrest. So again, defibrillation is crucial when a shock is required, but odds are that that won't be the case should you encounter a cardiac arrest in real life. If a shock isn't needed all the time, what is needed in every single cardiac arrest is high-quality CPR. Zoll AEDs with real CPR help assist clinicians and civilians to provide high-quality CPR. Again, it's the single most important factor when it comes to surviving a cardiac arrest. So I'm hopeful that the team has collected the results, and I'm going to turn it over, I believe, to Mr. Rick Packer to present those results to you.
Okay, let's see how we did here. Thank you, Keenan. That was very instructive. I've been away for a little while, so a CPR refresher is always good. When I told my parents they needed to take a CPR class to take care of my twins, they said, thank you, no. So, okay, first order of business is hats on. And eventually you'll see why we, the Lucky Blue group, got these styling hats, all right? So let's, before we talk about the winners, which gives us a little more time to make sure that the data is exactly right, let's talk a little bit about CPR. How many people have ever done CPR in their lives for real? For earnest on a human. Okay, so you have a lot of clinicians in this group, so there's a lot of people that have experienced that. For those of you that have never done CPR, and perhaps today was the first time doing it on the floor with the mannequin, what was your general impression? Easy, hard, right? It's tiring. It's tricky because trying to get the rhythm, trying to get the consistent depth. You noticed on the Barbaro paper they had a whole bunch of other quality measures like, let's see, not only do I have to get the right depth, but I also have to have the right release velocity. I've got to take my hands off the chest. I need to make sure that I have very short pauses between any of my trade-offs. I mean, there's just a lot of things that go on in CPR that make it very, very difficult. So which group out there think that they did just an excellent job within their group and probably had their compressions with, 60, 70% correct during the time they did it? Which team was the best team? Okay, so they're volunteering to be the best team. So maybe the rest of you not so much? Okay, so I'm going to read off some table numbers. And those table numbers, you will take your spiffy hat and you will turn your spiffy hat white, which is why we have these spiffy hats, because if you didn't see it, they are actually reversible, and you'll put on a white hat, okay? 100, 101, 103, 105, 106, 107, 108, 109, 110, 111, 112, 113, 114, 115, 116, 119, 120, 121. For those of you with Game of Thrones, this is the March of the White Walkers. 122, 123, 124, and 125. All right. So now let's turn to the winners and see if we can make some money on this round of our contest. Okay. So we have 2 prizes, one for the runner-up and one for the winning team. The runner-up got a whopping 43% of compressions within guidelines. So 43% of the time, the compressions were within guidelines. That's our second best group, and that was table 117. Our winning table really amped it up and got to 46% of compressions. And it wasn't this group that volunteered either. But they tried hard. And that is table 104. Yeah. All right. So they are our winners. After the event, you can go over to the money table and collect your money. All right? And then we will move on to the next part of the program.
Perfect. Thank you, Rick. You can give it back.
Do you want a hat?
Oh, I should wear a hat, shouldn't I? Should I do white or blue?
I think you are probably blue at this point.
Oh, perfect.
At your talent level.
Ah, there we go. So one clarifying comment. The 2 tables that got runners up and winning, 117 and go get your money now. So your table leader, take your money card and go to the money table so we can make sure you get paid. So each of those 2 tables got $50 each person at the table. So this is where we start winning money, right? So you all did CPR for 10 minutes. It was a little difficult. You didn't get any help the entire time. And if you look across the room, and one of the big reasons why we chose this is it's very, very few of the tables actually had compressions over that 40%, right? I mean, what do I count? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 tables out of 27 tables. So now we have the time where we can actually help you improve that, right? So like what we like to say is empowering the unexpected hero, right? So the AED in front of you has the technology to help you provide the highest quality CPR possible. Right? So the high quality CPR, we know it is the single most important clinical intervention during cardiac arrest. That is how you can help save a life without the use of an AED, right? Just because everybody makes it feel simple, right? Push hard and fast on the patient's chest doesn't mean it's easy, right? So small changes make a big difference. How hard is it to get between 2 and 2.5 inches? Pretty difficult. How hard is it to maintain that rate of 100 to 110? Very difficult. So the way the AED3 is designed when we put it in adult mode, so there's a reason we put it in pediatric mode, right? It was recording your compressions, but it wasn't just helping you provide that high quality CPR. If you look at the display here, there's 2 things to look for. So if your compressions are pink below that lower line, they're out of range. You're going too shallow. And there's 2 ways you could be going too shallow. You're just not pushing deep enough, or you're not recoiling. This is where the table leaders come in hand, right? All your table leaders now can help you. You want to switch responders, and you want to provide the highest quality CPR possible. Are you guys up for that? So this is where the opportunity to win more than just $50 per table, but $100 per table, right? So the table that improves the most, so it goes from the lowest score to the highest score, has an opportunity to win $100 per person at the table. And those 2 tables that won already, if you guys go up to 100%, you do also have the opportunity to win $100. So is everybody ready? So as soon as you see the timer on the display, that's when you start. You can turn the AED on. Leaders, put the jumper in and start right away. Let's go. Whoa, go backwards. Perfect. All right, we got a minute and a half left. All right, just about a minute left, everyone. That's great. 15 seconds left, guys. Let's go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Perfect. Table leaders, turn your AEDs off. Good job, everyone. Perfect. So table leaders, this is my quick little housekeeping. Turn your AEDs off and you can start transmitting the data. If you have any issues, same thing. Raise your table card up in the air and then one of the rescue net rangers will run over to your table and hopefully assist you. So hopefully in a little bit when we get to see your results, we'll see a lot more blue than white when we enable real CPR help, but I guess that's what we'll have to find out in a little bit. But it's my pleasure to introduce your next speaker. I've known John since he started at Zoll. He lives locally. He's our strategic distribution manager, so he works with some of our key business partners in the public safety segment. And he's passionate. He loves his job. He loves Zoll. He loves AEDs. And he's going to talk to you about everything you've learned today, kind of taking it forward and moving it forward and speaking with all your customers and the hospitals and institutions you work with on kind of how we can help increase that 2% number you saw at the beginning of the session. So let's put our hands together and welcome John up to the stage.
Thank you, Ian. So hopefully you found that it was a little easier to do your CPR when you had the CPR help, right? Right? So good afternoon. I'm John Pennington. I am the Strategic Distribution Manager for Zoll for the public safety channel for our markets here in the U.S. What does public safety do? We provide AEDs to a lot of different places. Pretty much anywhere that's outside of a hospital or a doctor's office, we are working through distribution to provide green AED pluses. We do not sell these direct, so we do go through distribution, and we use companies like Cintas, you may have heard of them, that sell our product. And so part of my responsibility is to go around the country and train sales reps on how to sell our product and to give them the Zoll story. So why do we do what we do? I think this morning we had a great story from someone that was saved by CPR and by Zoll equipment. I have another story I would like to share with you this afternoon that will explain further why I do what I do.
We had 2 games that night. I was in a lot of pain, which I was used to because I'd been playing in pain the entire season.
You could tell that she was laboring somewhat, but Claire just has the heart of a champion, and she's just going to keep playing.
I was sitting at the scorer's table, keeping score for the game, and I just heard a loud thud.
I think we just started yelling for help.
Yeah, yelling 911. You have a feeling of helplessness.
And it was very quickly that there was people there with us, very quickly.
She fell about right here. Starting back in 2006, our school got the first AED. As part of that training, we would come together and we would have drills unannounced. Because of the code blue drills, there were some things that were just instinctual to me. The AED is literally right outside of those doors. Go grab the AED, bring it back, and get to work.
You really
Terror.
can't describe
Yeah,
just the fear you had going through your mind.
it really looks like they were running a drill, that it was so quickly that people were to Claire and that they were taking care of her, and it was amazing.
She was in VFib, and so the only thing that would bring her heart back into a viable rhythm was to have a shock. The AED was needed in order to bring her back to life.
It's complete joy seeing her revived.
I'm just really thankful, and I feel really blessed that this is where I was chosen to go to school at, and just really thankful.
We know that God created her, and He knew about this moment before it happened, and He knew who would be here and what the outcome would be, and then what we would be responsible to do going forward to share her story. Well, we wouldn't let our child participate in a sport anywhere at this point if there wasn't an AED machine accessible. Waiting until someone's gone is not a good time.
Another powerful story, that's right. So I've had the privilege working at Zoll, being able to share Claire's story around the country and let people know that, look, sudden cardiac arrest can happen to anyone at any time. In Claire's situation, she had complained of shoulder pain and literally had a scope done on her shoulder. She would always consistently have shortness of breath during volleyball games. And during this particular evening, it was senior night, and her parents were there videotaping, and she went into cardiac arrest. It took nearly 11 minutes for fire and rescue to show up on the scene. And as we learned today, every minute that goes by, we lose a 10% chance of survival. Had they not had that AED there, Claire would not be with us today. And it's her story that inspires me to travel around the country and tell other people the story about Claire so that we can have more AEDs in the marketplace. As it was said, only 2% of the market has AEDs. It's pretty good job security for me. But we want more facilities and places of work, not just schools, but AEDs are going literally everywhere. They're being sold into restaurants, fitness centers, airports, banks, distribution centers, manufacturing, you name it. If there's a public place, there can be an AED there. So, I'll give you some more statistics. Sudden cardiac arrest, #1 cause of death in America. It's nearly 400,000 cases of sudden cardiac arrest a year. This includes, unfortunately, up to 14,000 school-age children, according to the American Heart Rhythm Society. Keep in mind that half of these sudden cardiac arrest victims really have no prior indication of heart problems. As I mentioned with Claire's situation, they thought there was something going on with her shoulder. In fact, there was talk about removing a rib because of the pain that she was experiencing. Come to find out, she had an underlying issue with her heart. She ended up having, I believe, a triple bypass surgery, ended up wearing a life vest after the surgery, and she now has a ICD and goes around telling her story. Sudden cardiac arrest doesn't discriminate. You can be in the perfect shape, you can be in the worst of shape. It really doesn't matter, right? You can be young and old. We've saved everything and in between. The only definitive treatment, as it's been told to you today, is high-quality CPR and defibrillation. I will show this. I'll go back. This is actually a really neat slide that we use, is that if you think about it, 11 people die in fires. And so the solution is to have fire extinguishers everywhere, right? Nearly 115 people are killed in car accidents, and so we all try to buckle up. Nearly 1,000 people are dying every day from out of the hospital from cardiac arrest, and really the solution there is to have a portable AED. Sudden cardiac arrest is also the #1 cause of death in the workplace. Nearly 15% of all cases of cardiac arrest in the workplace today is because of, or 15% of all cases of death is because of sudden cardiac arrest. This statistic has been mentioned, but if you depend on EMS, and when you pick up the phone and call 911, your chance of survival is only 5%. However, having a Zoll AED Plus on site can potentially increase a victim's chance of survival to 70% or more. So not having an AED, 5%, having a Zoll AED Plus hanging on the wall, 70% or more. I think you'd agree with me that there should be more AEDs out in the place today, right? So, I think you'd also agree that Zoll manufactures really the best products in the market today, right? We have our Life Vest, we have our hospital products, we have our EMS products, temperature management, but really, without the AED Plus, they may not be used, right? And so it's important that we have the AED Plus in the market so that more people have a chance to survive, okay? So going back to the study that was mentioned a little bit before, I'm going to give some more details with that. The study by Dr. Barbro, it demonstrated that a victim's chance of survival were more than doubled with real CPR help. During the first 2 years, there was, without CPR feedback like we just did a few minutes ago, there was no CPR feedback, and these are trained men and women that wake up every day and they go save lives. During 232 rescue attempts, 61 people made it. They were released from the hospital. After they did some scenario-based training, they did another 2 years, this time having CPR feedback. They did 252 rescue attempts, and 141 lives were saved with CPR feedback. That's 80 more people that got to go home to their families. Huge, right? What I say in the public safety sector is, if we can do that for a trained professional that wakes up every day and does that for their living, how much more can we help the lay rescuer? How much more did CPR feedback help you today? So something profound happened at Zoll and for us on the public safety side when the Barbro study was released. The American Heart Association saw this, and they came out with a consensus statement. I like to call it the AHA endorsement for Zoll. But I'll read this, and it says, with newer technology capable of monitoring CPR parameters during resuscitation, clinicians, or as I would say, any rescuer, is now able to monitor the quality of CPR in real time. Given the insights into clinical performance and discoveries in optimal practice, the most important part here, monitoring of CPR quality is arguably one of the most significant advances in resuscitation practice in the past 20 years, and one that should be incorporated into some of the resuscitations out there today. It didn't say some. It said every, right? So this is huge because I know for myself, I've been at Zoll for 6 years, but prior to being direct at Zoll, I was still selling Zoll product. And so I've been selling AEDs for nearly 10 years. For the first years of my career selling AEDs, we had a story to tell about CPR feedback. But this American Heart Association consensus statement really solidified our story. And the best story always wins, right? See, Zoll was forward-thinking when they made the AED Plus back in 2002, 2003, because they thought up of CPR feedback. And we're the only device, especially when this consensus statement was delivered, we're the only device that has real-time CPR help. So I can tell you that since this statement came out, our division has more than doubled. So it's exciting that people are really understanding the importance of high-quality CPR, not only in the professional setting, but also they're seeing that for the lay rescuer as well. At the end of the day, when we're performing CPR, all we're doing is guessing if we don't have real CPR help or something giving us that feedback, right? The most trained professionals guess. As it was mentioned to you, 5 to 6 centimeters, 2 to 2.4 inches. How are you going to know if you're pushing that deep on a chest? You don't. You guess. And the great thing is with the AED Plus, with the real CPR help, we don't have to do that. We're given that information so that we don't have to guess. We can know that we're giving someone the best chance of survival. So, how can you make a difference? What can you do to help make a difference today after hearing the stories that you heard this morning, perhaps after hearing Claire's story? Have you thought of ways to place AEDs in your community, in your town, in your city? Perhaps your hospital has a foundation. We've seen many times where hospitals will have a foundation to provide AEDs into the community. Does your hospital or practice make donations into your local community? These are all questions that you can talk to your cardiologist about. And do you or your hospital or practice participate in charity events? I've seen many times they'll have raffles, they'll have golf events where they raise funds to provide AEDs for maybe schools or within the local community. If you get a response, and I'm sure that you will, please work with your local Zoll channel partner manager. This is a great TOZA opportunity. I can tell you that we're all well-versed in the public safety market to take the ball and run with it. We're not asking you to go sell AEDs, right? You have your quotas and the things that you need to do. What we're asking is that perhaps this gives you another opportunity to speak with your doctor about something outside of the normal conversations that you have, right? And I think many of us are trying to think of ways, even in what I do when I go in and do all these different trainings, is what can I bring that's different today? So think about that. Can you talk to your doctor about AEDs, and maybe it's something that you can provide that information that we've talked about, these statistics, and then just kick it over to the public safety team. We will work with you in conjunction and provide more AEDs into the public safety market today. This has worked, and it's continually working. We're continually working with our different divisions at our TOZA meetings, and we're seeing more and more AED pluses put into the market. You know, today was a big day for us in the resuscitation division. Elijah let us know that today Zoll is, in the public safety market, is the #1 AED in the U.S., which is huge. I'd like to give another applause for that. We sell nearly 50,000 green boxes a year between 10 channel partner managers. So there's a lot of activity, a lot of things are going on, but we can collaborate and work together to provide more AEDs in the market. And why do we want to do that? Help us lead the way. We want to give another Claire the chance to survive. We want to give another Claire's parents, friend, the chance to survive. Like our keynote speaker this morning, a better chance of survival. And we can do that by placing more AEDs and really asking you to ask the question. Thank you. So at this time, I'm going to ask for Marshall to help us with quiz time. Everybody welcome Marshall. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So the One Zoll Advantage begins as another selling tool that you have available to go sell more of your own stuff, another opportunity to collaborate with your Zoll colleagues. But one of the things that strikes me today is it's a personal tool, right? It's something that you have based on this training if one of your family or one of your friends has an incident. And so I think we should thank the team for putting this together and helping us understand the importance of bonus. But if you're going to go talk to a physician or talk to a provider of any kind and talk about CPR, you need to have the facts. And so we're going to test whether some of the things that were discussed sank in. And the bonus for that is some extra cash to go along with whatever the teams get for being successful at actually practicing CPR. And the way it's going to work is we're going to draw a number, and if your table number is called, your group is going to have a chance. It does work. Your group is going to have a chance to answer the question for cash, right? It's going to be $50 per person in your group. And if you miss, we're going to draw another number and give another table a chance at that money. Your number is going to be out of the mix at that point, right? So you get a chance. One little rule is that you're not allowed to use your phones, okay? So no Googling it, no pulling up the picture that I saw people taking of the slide to try and remind themselves, right? So you've got to remember it in order to win. Okay, anything else is cheating. Okay? So let's have the first table number. 108, table 108. All right? They have them. All right, in relation to compression rate, what does the AHA recommend in the 2015 guidelines? You want them to have the money, you can say it out loud, but if you want your chance.
A rate of 100 to 120.
Yeah, congratulations, we have a winner. No, go ahead. 103. We have table 103 over there. I'm sorry, I should have pulled up the answer. In relation to compression depth, what does the AHA recommend in the 2015 guidelines? And either US, British, or metric works.
5 to 6 centimeters, 2 inches to 2.4 inches.
There's no bonus for getting it both ways, but yes, that's the right answer.
Should you have your card? No, I can only go
123. That was a groan. Name 2 of the 5 critical components to high-quality CPR.
Depth and rate. Adequate depth and rate.
Sure. That's the first 2. Congratulations, we've got another winner. Table 113. All right. Dr. Brobro and the Mesa Fire Department nearly tripled the odds of survival from cardiac arrest with the use of CPR technologies and intensive training. Could have been doubled, could have been quadrupled. This is a true or false question. Was it tripled?
Nearly tripled.
Is that your final answer?
True. True.
True. Congratulations. We got another winner. $105. Where's table 105? All right. Zoll AEDs with real CPR help enable responders to provide what to victims of sudden cardiac arrest? Need to fill in the blank. Oh, can we fade it out from that?
High quality CPR and defibrillation.
You're right. Right. Table 116, 116. Here in front. What percentage of victims of sudden cardiac arrest have no prior indication of heart problems? We're going to go with 40%. 40% is incorrect. We need another table number. 111. This guy's over here. And the answer is 50% is correct.
All right.
So this was the last of the planned questions, right? But Ian said that we had a little bit of extra cash and a little bit of extra time, and I thought all of these questions were too easy. And so we've got a bonus question that's especially hard, okay? For table 121. I have a feeling it might take a couple tables for this. Ready? Name one of the 3 people named as inventors of real CPR help. Just one. Looks like we need another table number. All right, one more table number. Table 114. I told you this was a tough one. And do I need to have them pick another table number?
We're going to go with the name I will say after this. Hamilton?
Ward Hamilton. We have a winner. Congratulations. You get to pick up some money as well. All right, and with that, I'd like to invite John Renner back up to announce the results of the second challenge.
So, how many more slides? How many more slides do we have? All right. All right, hats back on. Let's just take a shot here in the room of where you left off. So I think we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 tables that are blue at the moment. Okay? So everybody, for now, turn your hats back to blue. And I will read off the list of tables that are still with feedback below 40%. So unfortunately, if I read your table number, you need to turn your hat back to white. Table 108, table 111, table 113, table 115, table 117, and table 121. So we literally flipped the room. We went from about 6 tables under 40, 6 tables over 40, unaided, to everyone but 6 tables over 40 with CPR help, right? And it just shows you the power of the technology here. Now, if you were paying attention, there was one table in there that actually got worse, but we won't call them out for it. They know who they are. So, let's go to the, all right, hold on here. Well, actually, before I do that, why don't I do the recap, because I think that you may lose interest once I give out the winners here. So who would like to just volunteer? How was it the second time around? Anything that you'd like to talk to, the rest of the thing? Anything you noticed in terms of what feedback did in terms of helping you do compressions? Sure.
I was really terrified to do it without, because I've never given CPR.
Yeah.
And then having feedback, I didn't know what I was doing, but at least I had some guidance.
Sure.
Now I'm super scared if I ever have to perform CPR and I don't have feedback.
Yeah. Well,
What if
just
I do a
keep
bad
an
job
AD
and
with
I'm
you all
trying
the time.
to do a good job? Life vest.
That's great. So one of the common flaws in CPR is people don't push hard enough because they're afraid of hurting someone. Unfortunately, these folks are clinically dead, right? And so it is very common to break ribs performing CPR. We always like to say, a few broken ribs is a small price to pay for your life. But that is one of the things that people do find with feedback is the device will tell you push harder, right? And people are afraid to push that hard unless they've got the confidence of the device telling them it's the right thing to do. Any other perceptions or comments people want to share? Yeah, go ahead.
So one of the things that I noticed was that in addition to death, recoil was just as important in getting to the sweet spot, coming off the chest before you go back down.
That's great. Byron, very perceptive. So again, people talk a lot about rate and depth. One of the unique features of the way that Zoll does CPR feedback with the accelerometer is we can actually measure that recoil velocity. And we actually have in some clinical studies shown that getting your hands off and letting the chest naturally expand is really important to produce this sort of negative pressure in the chest, the vacuum that helps pull blood back into the heart so that it can be pushed out on the next compression. And if you've been through the first couple years of TOZA sessions, you've heard about the IPR technology that sort of manages the airway for that and helps optimize that release phase of CPR. But sure, getting your hands off the chest, you can't push back down 2 inches if you don't come off the 2 inches in the first place. Great comment. Anything else people noticed?
Depth. Oh, whoa. Oh. Sorry about that. Another piece about the depth that I personally found pretty interesting is I thought I was being able to mimic the same amount of depth throughout, but I noticed as you got into the last 30 seconds, wow, you're actually having to put more into it. And I don't think without the device I would have been able to detect that myself.
Yeah. Rescuer fatigue, very common. Hopefully you all felt that just doing 2 minutes of CPR is exhausting. Particularly pressing as hard and fast as you need to, and people get tired, and we do see that certainly over the course of a CPR interval, the quality will get worse, and the feedback helps correct for that. Anything else? Was this a valuable session? for everyone? So that's great. So let's move on to the results that you've all been waiting for. So our runner-up for highest compressions in target with a feedback-assisted score of 84%, table 126. So team leader, if you'd get the money card, go over to the table. You'll get $50 a person for that. And then the table with the highest CPR quality in the assisted phase with compressions in target of 88%, which is really phenomenal. Table 105. So they can also, team leader, go over, will $50 for the highest quality. But our grand prize is actually going to go to the team that had the greatest ratio of improvement, right? And so you can think about this and figure out how the math works between 0 and 100% on just how bad they had to have been in the first phase to achieve a nearly 1,100% improvement in unaided to aided CPR. And our grand prize winner for $100 per team member, table 110. So with that, I really appreciate the tension and the enthusiasm that you brought to the session today. I hope that you learned something. I hope you can take this back into your daily lives and be a better ambassador for Zoll and for the Life Fest. So with that, we are going to finish up a little early. We'll give you a little extra time before the banquets tonight. As a reminder, the rooms open, bars open at 6 p.m., but there is photo opportunities available in the foyer starting at 5:30. We'll see you tonight.
Thanks, guys. Is that on? Table leaders, can you bring your AEDs and mannequins to the far corner where the Rescue Net Rangers are, please? Table leaders, bring your AEDs and mannequins to the far table in the corner. Thank you.